Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I didn't get my Swedish up to speed in time, so I'm going to be doing this in English or Cantonese, up to you. But thank you so much for having me here. We are, as Axel was saying, from Futerra. We are a global change agency based out in London, but we also have an office in New York, a tiny office in Mexico City, and an office here in Stockholm. So it's always nice to see some familiar faces. Futerra started 18 years ago when two friends met on a sustainability leadership course, and they were just really tired of hearing people talk about sustainability as compromise, as sacrifice. Instead, they really wanted to hear more of the positives, so they decided to found Futerra to flip that narrative so that we could talk about exciting things such as possibility and opportunity. Our whole mission is around making sustainability so desirable that it becomes normal. So everything we do is towards creating positive change. We work across the logic of sustainability strategy, as well as the magic of creative communications to help businesses and organizations create change, but also to unlock the value of sustainability. And if you want to hear a little bit more of how we do that, we can talk later. But today, I am here to talk to you about the Good Life Goals. And it's so exciting for me to be here to speak to you guys because it's an audience that's enlightened in the sense that you believe that you can drive sustainability through making more informed purchases and more mindful consumption. And that's an area that I'm personally very passionate about as well. And maybe I can tell you a little bit about my life before Futerra just to see kind of where I'm coming from with this. So before Futerra, I was on two very different career paths, but kind of at the same time. So literally, I was a climate and energy campaigner for Greenpeace during the day, and then at night, I worked in the entertainment industry as a television presenter. So literally, I would, during the day, organize campaigns, write reports, and then at night, run into the studio, get my hair done, and record a weekly show about things that were happening in and around Toronto, which is where I'm from. The whole time I was doing this, I felt it was very hard for me because I felt like I was a fraud, a fake. I was feeling very conflicted. How could I call myself an environmental activist when I worked in an industry that cared a lot about what I looked, what I wear, where I would have to wear things that people laid out for me and eat food that people, set out for me. And then on the flip side, some of the perspectives from people in the industry were, oh, why would you want to be an environmentalist? It means a life of sad salads like this, or, get rid of all your nice clothes because you can only wear bamboo or hemp. And forget about nice holidays, not even driving, let alone flying. How could you ever think of that? So it was really frustrating for me because of course, if given the choice all or nothing, this life of restriction and sad salads versus living freely, what would you choose, right? But the thing is, that wasn't the real choice. It doesn't need to be so black and white. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you can't do anything. Just because you care about people and planet doesn't mean you can't live a life that's desirable. So I got really upset, and that became anger, and then after a full cycle, I decided that I would lead by example. I would want to be the living example, living, breathing example that you can live well and also do well for people and planet. So that's why I'm really excited to talk about the Good Life Goals, because it's really about that. So I know we did a little bit of a phone thing around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Can I just see a share of hands? How many of you have actually come across this? Okay, how many of you guys have seen the targets and the measurable impact under all of them? Okay, Cool. That's amazing. So just for anyone who's not entirely familiar, just to recap, UN created these after a lot of negotiation. It's the kind of global definition for sustainability. And I think it's fair to say that this is very much written for businesses and governments. And governments have done a really good job in terms of starting to look at local, national policies, and as well as initiatives to really kind of bring these goals to life. There's been a lot of discussion of who's accountable, who's going to pay for them and fund them, are we going to be able to reach them by 2030? Businesses have also done a lot of work around them. So I work with a lot of clients in terms of mapping out their sustainability initiatives based on the SDGs. So it's been a really, really helpful tool. And we're also seeing some NGOs really gather energy around them as well. But the one kind of part that seems to be missing are individuals. And experts have actually been quite dismissive of individuals. The first thing is, the public won't ever change enough, won't change their behaviors enough to really make an impact. The other belief is that if we put the responsibility on people, then what about the governments and the businesses that need to be held accountable? They should be the ones doing the heavy lifting. And I think those are both very valid concerns and concerns that we've discussed and talked a lot about at Futerra, but they're simply not true. We can make changes to our behaviors, and behaviors that have a huge impact. And we've seen this time and time again all around the world, from the rise of vegetarianism and veganism, with the reduction of smoking. We are seeing graphs like that all around the world. The rise of electric cars, the use of seatbelts. These are behavior changes that have an impact on health and safety of people and planet every single day. So that's not true. The other thing is governments and companies care a lot about what people think. Look at Blue Planet in the UK. I know it's caused a huge public outrage and awareness around plastics that's now kind of spread around the world. And you can see how quickly governments and businesses are responding. And I think maybe just a more homegrown example, Greta Thunberg. How amazing is that? A lone activist outside Parliament, and tomorrow she is going to be the face of one of the largest global climate protests. She has, inspired a whole generation of youth to stand up against climate change. So, what kind of message does that send to governments? Does it send to companies, to everyday people? So, going back to my activist roots, I'm not talking about actions like that one, where people are hanging around oil rigs and, really iconic action, big impact. I'm not even talking about getting out there and taking part in a march. The actions I want to talk to you about today are the everyday personal actions that we can all take that contribute to a more sustainable, happier, brighter, healthier future. People can make a difference, and people can have an impact. I know that, and I think many of you guys know that as well. At Futerra, we did a survey of about 1,000 people in the US and UK, and 96% of us think our actions can have an impact. More than half of us think that actually they can make a really, really big difference. And that's great news, because in October last year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published a report. And for the first time, they gave the global public a role to play. They asked us to cut back on meat, to save energy, to car share. And that's great news. But the story doesn't end there. Although we believe that we can make a difference, we think we need help, and we need brands to help us. At the moment, brands are very much talking about their values and what they're doing, but how are they helping us realize our values, our beliefs, and help us make an impact personally? If brands can't help us live more sustainable lifestyles, they're going to disappoint 88% of people, maybe. And it's tricky because right now, what we see is that brands actually make it harder for us. So if you think about your day-to-day interaction with brands, when you order food, they make it very easy and convenient for you to take packaging away, but very difficult to throw it out and very difficult to recycle, causing a lot of guilt. You have a lot of food labels that are very confusing or care information that's incomplete. So how do I take care of this thing to make it last longer? Is this healthy for me or not? There's a lack of transparency in terms of who makes your clothes, who makes the products, where do they come from, how do these people work, what's their environment like, and even when you order food for delivery to your home, the default is that it comes with plastic cutlery. Why do I need that at home? And at the same time, some of the brands that have more sustainable options, there's that premium, that price premium. And so you have to be able to afford it to be able to access these more sustainable products. And that's a real problem. And that's probably why, brands are making it harder for us. But the thing is, it might feel like a stretch that we, every day, can have an impact in pushing brands to be more reflective of what we believe in and our values. But we actually are evidence of that every day. Every time you take out your wallet, every time you tap that contactless card, you are voting for the products, the brands, the companies that you believe in. And that's why we kind of created the Good Life Goals. For the goals to be reached, everyone needs to do their part. Governments, the private sector, civil society, people like you, people like us, people like all 7.5 billion of us. People power is just as powerful people. And it's time we kind of, get out of the sidelines. A lot of businesses have kind of positioned themselves at the center as the heroes, the actors, the ones that are making the change, whereas people like us, consumers, we're just the cheerleaders, or we're the beneficiaries, or we're just on the sidelines. It's time for us to kind of stand up and take a role that's active. So, I'm going to go into the Good Life Goals. Good Life Goals we created with members of the 10YFP, so it's called the 10-year program on sustainable consumption and production. So it's a big UN consulting group. It's made up of different UN agencies, research agencies, one in particular, the Stockholm Environmental Institute here, as well as the IGES in Japan. It's led by the governments of Sweden and Japan. So we've had a lot of input from this market. When we were deciding what actions would go in, because we had hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands even, when you looked at all 17 of the different goals, we decided to set 3 criteria to make sure the actions that we had in the Good Life Goals were simple and collectively could make a big impact. And this impact is measurable because all of these actions can be linked back to the Sustainable Development Goals, not just the top line, but the targets that sit behind it. So the first criteria was, will this action generate the greatest tangible impact on achievement of the goal if the public take it up at scale? If 1 billion people did this, is it going to make a big impact? Will this action be accessible, relevant, affordable to the greatest number of people for both over and under consumers? I think thinking about, where the position we're in, we're quite fortunate, but will people living in different lifestyles be able to take these actions as well? And finally, is this action comprehensible to the public? And we looked at a secondary education level, so an 11-year-old. Would they be able to understand what we're asking of them? Because it would be a failure if we made it really, really confusing, because we had inputs such as dematerialize your life, make a transportation modal shift. And so if we weren't asking for very simple, clear actions, it would be a real failure of this project. And then finally, we made emojis. For all our visual audiences, we created these emojis. Emojis have been said to be the global language. They tell stories, they depict emotion, and they make it very clear it's about individuals. It's not about industry, it's not about governments, it's about people like these ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this one maybe in a little bit of detail just to give you a bit of thinking in terms of how we frame these. So the first ask is always a learning ask. It's about informing yourself. So whether you're the 11-year-old or a 100-year-old, it's something anyone can do, which is become more informed and learn about the subject. Actions 2, 3, and 4 become more specific actions. And as you go down, they become harder in the sense that they might not be as accessible. So for example, share and donate what you can. It's got a wider connotation, more people can do that. But then as you go down, buy from companies that pay people fairly, save, borrow, and invest responsibly. You need to have the resources to be able to do that. So we wanted to give a range so that different people could take different actions. And then the final action is a demand action. Use your voice. We want to say vote, but we also want these to be used in China. So demand decent wages and opportunities for all. So this is kind of the format. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but I want to go through them and just touch on some of the really interesting things and just some ideas of, you know, what were we thinking when we were building these and what do we think people can really start to do? So eating better, I'm going to talk about food in a later one, but buying local, seasonal, fairly traded food, we can all do a little bit more of that. And I think for me personally, it's really fun to try new recipes. Sometimes there's these veggie boxes that you can get, and it's like just full of vegetables that I've never seen before. I need to look it up, like how do I make this? But see it as a challenge, it's fun. It's, you know, being creative, you're trying something else. Stay well. So this one was very interesting, especially number 4, valuing mental health and well-being. So we had a really interesting idea around this one, which was, could we solve, right now we are seeing young people, not just young people, we are going through a mental health epidemic. We're becoming more and more aware of the challenges with mental health. And a lot of the research is showing that overconsumption, social media, that's really impacting it. And we already know the environmental impact of overconsumption. So if we were able to solve one, would we be able to solve the other? And how is it linked? Learn and teach, so thank you, we effect. We've touched on some of these, but I'll talk about it from a more personal view. But this one is a really favorite one because some of these actions are not for parents, for guardians, and it's about, you know, future generations and how do we best prepare them for a world with 21st century challenges. And teach kids kindness is one of the favorite ones that have come up. It's very basic, but it's one of those things that are very emotional. Another one around future generations is treat everyone equally, raise kids to expect equality. How powerful is that? Imagine we raise the next generation just to expect equality. What would that world look like? Save water. So these are actions that are written very simply, and these are actions that you can do at home as a homemaker, as an individual, as someone in your office. But reporting and fixing leaks, for example. Imagine a leak day after day. How much of that water, our most precious resource, is just going down the drain, let alone kind of water bills. Use clean energy. So I think you guys are pretty, you know, on track with this goal with kind of over 50% of your energy being renewable. But for me in London, our flat, when we first moved in and we were looking for a new energy provider, we did lots of research, and the one that came out was Bulb Energy, and it was 100% renewable, and it was also cheaper. So it actually reflects some of those graphs that we're seeing in terms of the uptake of renewables and how that it's not just at cost, but even cheaper. Do good work. So this one is around making sure that the stuff that you buy nobody gets exploited. And it's tricky because we've talked a lot about transparency, and sometimes it's very difficult to understand, you know, who makes this, where does it come from? One of my favorite brands is they're called Everlane, and they're all about transparency. Transparency in terms of how they cost things, so there isn't that added sustainability premium, but also transparent about their factories and where their materials come from. Making smarter choices. So this one I really like. It's about especially welcoming innovations that make the world a better place. There are so many amazing brands out there doing really cool things. I think sometimes it feels like, oh, there's too much information, but it can also be a challenge. Be curious, go find out, you know, what brands are all about. And I think also be smart in the sense, I remember one of my friends saying, back in the day working in TV, oh, that means you have to throw out all of your leather then, say goodbye. And it's like, no, I'm not gonna go throw out all my stuff. But maybe when my leather bag is worn out, the next bag I buy, I'll do my research. I hear pineapple leather is gonna be all the rage. Be fair. I think this one for me, buying from companies that pay tax and treat people fairly. You can tell me how great you are on the environment, how great you are with social causes or volunteering in the community. If you don't pay tax and you don't pay your people fairly, that's credibility out the door. So I think that one's very important as well. Love where you live. I think this one's a really nice one. Getting to know your neighbors and welcoming new people and creating that community to support us, because some of these changes are going to take time. It's going to take momentum. And having that support system is going to be really, really crucial. For my neighbors in my building, what we've done is we share our vacuum cleaner and our step ladder. Some of those big things where you use like once in a blue moon, instead of buying them, we just share. So kind of moving towards that sharing economy. Living better. So I think this one is a very important one and probably the second most relevant. Solitaire Townsend, our co-founder, whose book is outside, I believe, Happy Heroes, talks about how you can lead a happier and healthier life just by making a positive difference. You can feel good by doing good. It's, for any of you guys who were here last year, I think she went into the psychology of it a little bit more. It's called the helper's high. That when you do these little actions, you get a little high. It can become addictive and contagious in the best possible way. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is number 4, collecting friends and experiences, not just things. Some of the most impactful actions are actually not actions at all. It's about a mindset shift. Instead of rebuying and buying more, what about repairing? And this whole thing, instead of buying more material goods, what about experiences that you can share and last, make memories that last way longer? And act on climate. So this is the one where I wanted to talk about food a little bit more. When we first wrote out the actions for this, action number 3, eat more plants and cut down on meat. It was a very controversial one with our partners. We didn't really know, could we write this? Could we back it? Would the UN be okay to say that and ask that of people? And we released the Good Life Goals a month before that IPCC report that I was talking about. So when that report asked people the same thing, we knew that kind of the debate in terms of the impact of consuming meat on environment was no longer really a debate. But I think it's a really tricky one. It's a hard one because food is so much part of our culture. And I think perhaps this is one of the ones where it doesn't need to be so black and white. I think my old Greenpeace colleague who's got a big tattoo that says vegan on the back of his head might kill me if I say this, but maybe you can be a meat eater but love vegetables and enjoy vegetables. Maybe you can be on a plant-based diet but eat eggs, if we were all just a little bit more conscious about what we eat, that would make a huge difference. For me personally, the journey hasn't been, an overnight thing. Growing up in a Chinese family, meat and fish was very much part of my diet. And when I moved out and lived on my own, I had more control, but I didn't cut out meat overnight. But what I started to do was, maybe I won't buy meat from the supermarket, I'll only buy it from local markets. Now, maybe I won't cook meat at home, I'll only eat meat when I go out and know it's from a good source. Now I kind of identify myself as a flexitarian, like I rarely eat meat. And when I do, maybe it's with my family, and maybe it's for special occasions, because those things are important to me, and I'm just trying to do my best. So I think sometimes taking that black and white approach can be really challenging. It's not all or nothing, and we can all just try to do our best, and that would make a huge difference already. Cleaner seas, oops. So this one is, we need to stop using our oceans and our waterways as our sewage. And I think this whole awareness around plastics has really shed a light on how can we cut down on unnecessary plastics. And I think things like, you're carrying more stuff. I've got a water bottle now, I've got a coffee cup, but honestly, it's cut down my personal plastic use so much more. And do you really need a straw? Maybe if you've got sensitive teeth or something, drinking a cold drink. Love nature. Discover the wonders of the natural world. It almost feels like a treat instead of an ask. But if people don't spend time outside, they're not going to value it. They're not going to want to protect it, especially children. If we're raising the next generation to be very much indoor species, they're not going to think about caring for the environment, so make sure you get them out there and soak up the sun. 16, I think this one is, be kind, be tolerant. It's about making peace, and I think for me, a lot of the decisions I make whenever I have tough situations, I think about and I ask myself, is this a decision I'm making out of fear, or is it a decision I'm making out of love? And I think it's really important to be kind and be tolerant and have that mindset in everything that you do. And then the final one, which is around coming together. The fact that, these are all kind of personal actions that everyone can take. The strength lies in union. It's the collective power of these actions that are really going to make a difference. And I don't think I need to convince anyone in this room about the power of cooperation. The fact that you guys are all part of this cooperative shows that you believe that by working together, we can reverse climate change. By working together, we can create a world that's more fair and inclusive. But you can't do it on your own. So this whole, all of the good life goals, they're all very important. All of the SDGs, we need to look at them as a whole. But this idea around coming together about partnerships is going to be so powerful. And I think the final action, which is help make tomorrow better than today, that's really what it's all about. We're not trying to make life harder. We're not trying to get out of a situation. We want to get out of the situation and have something that's positive to look forward to. We don't want to just leave the world for the next generation that's not in crisis. We want to leave a world that is hopeful, that's beautiful, that's healthy, and full of opportunity. So if I haven't convinced you enough in terms of the power that individuals can have, that as consumers that we can have every time we vote, some of the things that I pulled out was around, every time you buy at a local business, you tell the world your community is worth more than a big faceless corporation. Every time you buy organic, you're telling the world you want more farmers to grow healthy, safe food that regenerates the health of our soil, because soil health is so important. Every time you buy certified fair trade, you're fighting poverty. Every time you buy from a business owned by women or people of color, you help build an inclusive economy. And every time you don't buy something, you're telling the world that you don't need to buy that thing to live a good life. The Good Life Goals are all online and available for everyone to download and use. It feels like the energy and awareness levels are very high amongst consumers. People are tired of feeling guilty. You know, I'm personally tired of feeling guilty. Maybe I won't speak for everyone. Of not knowing what to do. Or maybe you're tired of, you know, not knowing what to do, but knowing that you could do better. Like, the best case scenario is I'm a bystander. Like, I'm not making things worse, but I'm not really making things better. And it's hard because sometimes you just need to know where to start. And I'm hoping that the Good Life Goals has given everyone here today some bright ideas in terms of actions that we can start doing tomorrow or even today. And I think what we can do is, hopefully, the mission, should you guys choose to accept it, is to be that living, breathing example that you can live and you can really contribute to the sustainable development goals and live a good life. Start that wave in your community. You know, start that ripple effect. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it at work, and be that example. And the final thing I will leave you with is the film that we used to launch the Good Life Goals project at the UN last year. So I hope the sound is on. Thank you, everyone.